we'd had a lot of the local rum. You've had way too many rums. However, if you do pick me, I guarantee you 100.
Close to 7,000 runs in international cricket, close to 200 international wickets as well. Scott Bernard Styris, I know you're not going to like that one, Scotty, is here with us at Man's Life to take us through his years in sport, not just a year in sport that mattered, but this should be a fun chat with one of the true all-rounders of the game, not just on the field, but off it as well. I'm glad to see the Cam Smith hairstyle still exists. I love it. Give us a little look on the side.
We'll trim it up a little bit. It's looking a little raggedy.
We always talk about how 1 year can change the life of a sports person. Was it similar for you? Was there a transformational year, and do you believe that a year can transform a sports person's life?
Yes, and I will pick up on something you just said. Mine took a little bit longer, so I will cheat on your question. And
glad you always do it. I'm glad, Scotty.
Yeah.
Happy to say.
I know. So I've gone with 2001 through to 2004. Now that's quite a range, but it's not so much what specific scores or anything like that. It was just what ended up happening. And I've got to take you back even further. So even growing up, when I was 13, I'd be batting 3 and not bowling. But then the next year at the next tournament, I'd be opening the bowling and batting 10. And then that would flip over again the next year. And so the all-rounder thing started early for me, but it would change every single year. So it took 3 years to get back to where it should do, but it was transformational for me in that regard because it got back to the role and the style of play, which was more me and more natural.
It's funny you talk about the run-up to your test debut as well, Scotty. I would have thought you'd pick 1999, your ODI debut, but then at the test level, 100 on debut, backed up by 69 unbeaten in the second innings. But it wasn't actually supposed to be your test debut, was it? Because you think back to Karachi, was it, in 2002? You were handed the test cap and then pretty much yanked away because it was a bomb blast, obviously, for that test. So what was that like for you mentally? Because every kid obviously dreams about making a test debut, and you were that close before having it taken back.
Well, I can actually add to that and say, so that was 02, you're right, in Karachi. But if I go back even further, 2 years in 2000, we were in South Africa. And whilst I wasn't handed my test cap, I would have played the test series and played one of the test matches there and would have made my test debut there as well. And one of the boys jumped on me in a warm-up game and I ripped the cartilage in my knee.
Jeez.
So I think that was the end of my tour. So that was supposed to be my test debut in South Africa in 2000. Then I actually get presented with my cap. We were about to leave for the ground when the suicide bomb hit in Karachi. So that was the end of that test match, and in fact the end of that tour as well. We won the first test match, and Stephen Fleming, and we'd had a lot of the local rum to celebrate after that test match. Stephen Fleming, who'd had a few too many, said, I'm gonna pick you in the next test, so get ready for it.
Nice.
And I said, look, you're unfair, you're being unfair. You've had way too many rums. However, if you do pick me, I guarantee you 100. And so there we go, and he picks me in the test match, and we play.
Did you go through that phase though when, as you said, had one test cap, almost handed to you, that went away, got jumped on in South Africa. Did you start to think at any point, shit, maybe this just isn't meant to happen. Maybe I'm just going to play ODIs. Did that ever cross your mind?
Well, it did, because I think to this day I'm the last New Zealand cricketer to have an operation done overseas because the cartilage was torn. I had the operation in Bloemfontein, which was where it happened, I think, from memory. And let's just say the best surgeons don't reside in Bloemfontein, South Africa. He took out too much, and of course cartilage you can't replace. That's it. It's bone on bone from that point forward. So it took me 9 or 10 months of which to then play again from a simple knee cartilage injury.
How much adrenaline was pumping through the 90s? Test debut, 100 on test debut. I mean, that is what anyone dreams of, Scotty. I mean, I knew, for me as a kid, it was never growing up wanting to get an ODI 100 on debut. It was that test 100 on debut. I mean, how difficult were the 90s, the nervous 90s? Were they the nervous 90s? Were you powering through it?
Yeah, you know what? There's a couple of parts to that. One, and in some ways I was fortunate because, with respect to, I think my test debut was in Grenada. I always thought it was in one of the St. Vincent's or St.
St. George.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, yeah, it was one of those.
Done my homework.
I keep forgetting these things. Yeah, I know you have. You have. It's not one of the big grounds. It's not 80,000. It's not Eden Gardens. It's not Lords or the MCG or Cape Town or whatever. So you don't have that sort of cauldron atmosphere. So there wasn't that same pressure, I will be honest.
You've won IPLs. You've been around successful setups a long time. You played a lot of county cricket, massive records there as well. How much did life for you change as a human being, as a cricketer, financially, as an emotional, as the emotional side of life goes as well? That phase for you, how much did that change?
It didn't change too much, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we're from New Zealand, so therefore there's, it's not the number one sport in the country, a relatively big amount of public interest. But, from the financial side or whatever, it was more the fact that finally I was batting in a position, batting number 4, bowling a bit. For me, that was exactly the way it was. And so, but it wasn't I wasn't good enough to be a genuine all-rounder. There's very few genuine all-rounders, guys who can make the team as a batsman alone or as a bowler alone. It's always one heavily weighted towards either side.
You actually broke the ODI bowling record for New Zealand on that same tour of the West Indies, 6 for 20 odd, I think, in that series. So was that an aspect you enjoyed, though, the bowling side of it, knowing that, yes, your role was now stationed as a batting all-rounder, but the ability to contribute with the ball?
Yeah, because of that mentality I was talking about, you just had to be involved. And, in the early days, it was as a genuine seamer, obviously never quick, but the ability to I used to be a swing bowler, try and sort of move it around.
When you look back and you think about the things you did right in that phase, how would you sort of tell a young guy who wants to create that phase, Scotty, to say, this is perhaps what I did right, this is where I was in the zone? Did you feel at some stage that you were just in the right frame of mind in terms of being in the zone?
Yeah, I never mastered that. And I think that's the big difference between the very best players and the rest of us, is that we would have our day, but the very best players would have their day more often. It's because they could work out, and I talk about it in commentary, about tempo being such a crucial thing, whether it be, you see someone like Suryakumar Yadav, who I think has got his T20 tempo down pat. He's brilliant. One day is an even longer version, not quite so much. He hasn't quite figured that out. And that's where the likes of Sachin or Ricky Ponting or Brian Lara, that's where you have total admiration, because they could figure out when to go up and down the gears. It's like being in a car. I think you've got to always learn and try and figure things out. You never stop.
Just want to know, before we shut shop though, how come you didn't pick 2007, given the incredible World Cup run you had? I mean, you were outstanding in that World Cup. I'll make you feel a little old here, because I grew up watching that World Cup thinking, shit, where did this come from?
I love the World Cups because World Cups was an opportunity to have everybody together at the same time on the same conditions against the same opposition.
ODI hundreds versus Test hundreds, ODI fifer in your bag as well. How much does each one mean? Do you sort of have a value on each of them?
No, not really, mate. I mean, you remember unusual parts of your career. You don't necessarily remember. I was never a completely stats-driven guy. I mean, I take notice of it all. Yes, I'd be lying if I didn't say that. But I was never striving to have 20 Test hundreds or 10, 20 ODI hundreds, 10,000 runs or anything like that.
Well, Scotty, you've taken us down this uncharted territory into 2001 to 2004. Thanks so much, mate. It's been a pleasure to just not have to review on the golf course, but actually go down memory lane and get those really, really nice memories out of you. And I hope you enjoyed talking about them as well.
I did indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thank you. Every kid obviously dreams about making a Test debut, and you were that close before having it taken back.
Well, I can actually add to that and say, so that was 02, you're right, in Karachi.